I've spent most of my adult life behind the wheel of my big rig, traversing the vast and winding highways that crisscross the United States. In my line of work, you come to expect the unexpected, to deal with the unpredictable nature of the road. But there's one experience that will forever linger in the darkest corners of my mind, a nightmarish encounter that unfolded at a desolate truck stop somewhere along the forgotten roads of Oklahoma. It was a sweltering summer night, and I was hauling a load of goods from Tulsa to Oklahoma City. The air conditioning in my cab was on the fritz, making the inside of my truck feel like a stifling sauna. Beads of sweat trickled down my temples as I pushed through the seemingly endless stretch of highway, desperate for some respite from the oppressive heat. As I neared the halfway point of my journey, exhaustion weighed on my eyelids like lead, and I knew it was time for a break. I glanced at the time, 2:34 a.m. I needed to find a truck stop to rest and grab a bite to eat. The problem was that the truck stop options along this stretch of the highway were few and far between, and most of them had gained a less than stellar reputation among truckers. There was one place, in particular, that every seasoned driver warned me to avoid like the plague: the Devil's Junction truck stop. It was notorious among the trucking community for its desolation and eerie atmosphere, and the stories that circulated about it were enough to send shivers down your spine. Tales of drivers who had parked there and never been seen again, their rigs left to rust in the parking lot. Whispers of strange lights and inexplicable phenomena that plagued anyone who dared to stop there after nightfall. It was a place where the line between reality and myth blurred, and where rationality gave way to superstition. But that night, my fatigue got the best of me, and my options were limited. I had been on the road for hours without a break, and the Devil's Junction truck stop was the only refuge within miles. I swallowed my apprehension and reluctantly veered off the highway, following the dimly lit road signs that pointed toward my destination. The closer I got, the more my unease grew. The road leading to the truck stop was winding and narrow, surrounded by dense forest on both sides. The trees loomed overhead, their branches clawing at the night sky like skeletal fingers. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was driving deeper and deeper into the unknown, that I was descending into a place where the rules of reality no longer applied. Finally, I reached the Devil's Junction truck stop, and the sight that greeted me sent a shiver down my spine. The place was a relic from a bygone era, a dilapidated structure that seemed to have been abandoned for years. The flickering neon sign above the entrance barely spelled out the words Devil's Junction, its letters missing and broken. The parking lot was deserted, save for a handful of rusted, long-forgotten rigs. The eerie silence that hung in the air was oppressive, as if the very ground itself held its breath in anticipation. I parked my truck in a remote corner of the lot, far away from the other vehicles, and killed the engine. The cab was now bathed in darkness, the only source of light coming from the pale glow of the moon. As I settled into my bunk, my unease grew into a sense of foreboding. I couldn't deny that I had heard the stories, that I knew the legends surrounding this place. But I pushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself that it was all just superstition and that I was being irrational. Minutes turned into hours as I lay there, trying to find sleep in the suffocating darkness. But it remained elusive, and the silence outside was only broken by the distant chirping of crickets. I tossed and turned, my mind racing, and I decided to turn on the radio for some distraction. I reached for the CB radio, the crackling static filling the cab. I scanned through the channels, listening to the voices of other truckers as they chatted about their journeys and the road ahead. It was a small comfort, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone in this forsaken place. But then, as I tuned to a seemingly empty frequency, something unusual happened. A voice, distorted and faint, began to emanate from the speakers. "Hello there, traveler," the voice said, its tone dripping with an eerie familiarity. "You're not from around here, are you?" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something unnatural about that voice, something that sent chills down my spine. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The voice on the radio chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Just call me the Watcher, my friend. I've been watching you for a while now." Dread settled over me like a heavy shroud. I had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. The voice claimed to have been watching me, but from where? And how did it know I was an outsider? "You're in a dangerous place, traveler," the watcher continued, its words laced with a sinister edge. "A place where the lost and the forgotten wander. But you're different. You have a choice to make." I felt a growing sense of panic as I listened to the cryptic words of the watcher. What choice did I have to make? What did it want from me? The voice on the radio ignored my questions and continued, "Do you dare to explore the mysteries of this place, to uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the darkness?" I hesitated, my mind racing. The stories, the legends, the warnings, they all flooded back into my consciousness. This was a place where truckers vanished, where strange occurrences defied explanation. And now, I was being offered a choice that could change the course of my life forever. "I don't want any trouble," I stammered, my voice quivering. "I just want to rest and get back on the road." The watcher's laughter echoed through the cab, a haunting sound that seemed to reverberate in the very air around me. "Trouble, my friend, is already upon you. But whether you embrace it or run from it, that is a choice only you can make." With those cryptic words, the voice on the radio fell silent, leaving me alone in the darkness with my thoughts. The sense of foreboding that had gripped me earlier had now intensified, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being drawn into something far beyond my understanding. Hours passed, and the watcher's voice did not return. I lay there in my bunk, my mind racing, as I contemplated my next move. Should I stay and investigate the mysteries of this forsaken place, or should I heed the warnings and flee before it was too late? As the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon, I made my decision. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that there were eyes upon me, and that I was not alone in this desolate truck stop. I started the engine of my rig and pulled out of the Devil's Junction truck stop, leaving behind the eerie silence and the mysteries that lingered in the shadows. As I merged back onto the highway, the sense of relief that washed over me was palpable. But the memory of that night still haunts me, and I can't help but wonder about the secrets that lurk in the darkness of the Devil's Junction truck stop. The watcher's voice, the legends, the stories, they all linger in my mind, a constant reminder that the road can take you to places you never intended to go, and that some mysteries are better left unsolved. If you enjoy listening to horror stories for hours at a stretch, then you are at a right place. Subscribe to Mr. Scare right away. It was a hot and humid night in July, the kind of night where the air feels heavy and oppressive. I was on a long haul from Houston to Dallas, pushing through the endless miles of desert-like landscape that stretched out before me. The dashboard of my truck glowed with an eerie green hue, casting an otherworldly light on the road ahead. As I approached the halfway mark between the two cities, I noticed a weathered sign on the side of the highway that read Desert Oasis Truck Stop. It had been hours since I'd seen any signs of civilization, and the prospect of a hot meal and some rest was too enticing to resist. I took the exit and followed the winding road until I reached the truck stop. It stood like an oasis in the desert, a lone beacon of light against the pitch-black night. The lot was eerily empty, with only a few dimly lit trucks scattered about, their drivers likely seeking refuge from the relentless heat. I pulled my rig into a parking spot near the back, far away from the other vehicles. The silence that enveloped the place was deafening, and the only sound that broke the stillness was the low hum of the idling engines. I climbed into the back of my cab, my stomach growling in anticipation of a meal from the truck stop's diner. But as I settled in and prepared to leave the comfort of my cab, a sense of unease washed over me. Something about the place didn't sit right with me. The parking lot was far too deserted for a truck stop in the middle of the night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I peered out the window, scanning the area for any signs of movement, but there was nothing to be seen. Brushing off my unease as a result of fatigue, I finally decided to step out of the cab and make my way to the diner. The air outside was stifling, the oppressive heat lingering even in the darkness of night. The flickering neon lights of the truck stop sign buzzed overhead as I walked towards the entrance. As I entered the diner, the bell above the door jingled softly, and the scent of grease and stale coffee filled the air. The place was empty, save for a weary-looking waitress behind the counter, her apron stained and her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Evening, hon," she said, her voice as tired as her eyes. "You're the first customer we've had in hours. What can I get you?" I ordered a burger and fries, hoping it would be a quick and quiet meal. The waitress nodded and went to place my order with the cook, leaving me alone in the dimly lit diner. As I waited for my food, I couldn't help but overhear a low conversation coming from the corner booth. Two men sat there, hunched over a map spread out on the table, their voices hushed and tense. They were dressed in dark suits, a stark contrast to the usual attire of truckers at a place like this. I couldn't quite make out what they were saying, but their hushed tones and furtive glances raised my suspicions. It was as if they were planning something that they didn't want anyone else to know about. My meal arrived, and I tried to focus on my food, but my curiosity got the best of me. I couldn't help but listen in on their conversation, hoping to catch a snippet of information that might shed some light on their intentions. Midnight, one of the men whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the diner's air conditioning. "We meet him at midnight, just as he instructed. The package must be delivered tonight." The other man nodded, a grim expression on his face. "The boss won't be happy if we fail. We can't afford any slip-ups this time." My heart raced as I realized that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had anticipated. These men were involved in some kind of shady deal, and it was happening right under my nose. I discreetly reached for my phone and dialed 911, hoping to alert the authorities about the suspicious activity. But as I held the phone to my ear, I was met with nothing but silence. No signal, no connection, just a void of dead air. My heart sank as I realized that I was cut off from the outside world, isolated in this remote truck stop with no way to call for help. I had no choice but to observe and gather as much information as I could. The two men continued their conversation, their voices growing more animated. They spoke in vague terms, using code words and cryptic references that made it difficult to discern the nature of their illicit business. "The rendezvous point is set," one of them said, glancing around the diner as if to ensure that no one was eavesdropping. "We'll hand off the package and be on our way before anyone suspects a thing." The other man leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just remember, the boss doesn't take kindly to mistakes. We can't afford any loose ends." As they spoke, my mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. What were they delivering? Who was this boss they referred to, and what would happen if their operation went awry? The waitress returned with the check, her eyes darting nervously between me and the two men in the corner booth. She seemed to sense that something was amiss, but she said nothing, handing me the bill with a trembling hand. I paid for my meal, leaving a generous tip for the waitress, and made my way back to my truck. The unease that had settled over me earlier had now turned into full-blown fear. I knew I had to get out of there and report what I had witnessed to the authorities. As I climbed into the cab of my rig and started the engine, I couldn't help but glance one last time at the diner. The two men were now gone, their booth empty, as if they had never been there. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. I pulled out of the truck stop and back onto the highway, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. Who were those men, and what were they involved in? What was the mysterious package they were delivering, and who was the ominous boss they spoke of? As I drove away from the desert oasis truck stop, I couldn't escape the feeling that I had narrowly escaped a dangerous situation, that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. I reached for my phone once more, hoping to finally get a signal and report what I had witnessed to the authorities. But as I held the device in my hand, I realized that it was still devoid of signal, as if the world itself had conspired to keep me in the dark. I continued my journey to Dallas, my mind consumed by the chilling encounter at the truck stop. The memory of those two men, their whispered conversations, and the mysterious package they were delivering haunted me, and I knew that I had stumbled upon something that was best left untouched. So, I share this story now, not as a warning or a plea for help, but as a testament to the dark and mysterious forces that can lurk in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, the road can take you to a destination you never intended to reach, and the things you see along the way can change your life forever. As I continue my life as a truck driver, I can't help but wonder what became of those two men and their illicit operation. Did they succeed in their delivery, or did something go horribly wrong? I may never know the answers, but one thing is certain: I'll always remember the night I stumbled upon the deal at midnight at the Desert Oasis truck stop in the heart of Texas. I've been a truck driver for nearly 2 decades, hauling goods from one corner of the United States to another. In all that time, I've encountered my fair share of odd and eerie situations on the road. But nothing could have prepared me for the nightmarish experience I had one cold winter evening at the desolate truck stop near Wendover, Utah. It was late December, and I was on a long haul from Denver, Colorado, heading to Reno, Nevada. The snow had been falling steadily for hours, blanketing the landscape in a thick, white shroud. The temperature had plummeted, and the roads had become treacherous. I was exhausted, the long hours of driving weighing on me, and I knew I needed a break. As I approached Wendover, I spotted the flickering neon sign for High Desert Truck Stop. The place looked like it had seen better days, but it was a welcome sight in the midst of the frigid wilderness. I pulled into the truck stop's dimly lit parking lot, the crunch of snow beneath my tires echoing in the eerie silence. The lot was empty, save for a few abandoned vehicles buried under mounds of snow. The snowstorm had driven away any other truckers who might have sought refuge here. I parked my rig in a remote corner of the lot and killed the engine, letting the eerie stillness of the night wash over me. The wind howled outside, and the cold seeped through the cracks in my cab. I wrapped myself in a heavy blanket and settled into my bunk, hoping to catch a few hours of sleep. But the solitude of the truck stop weighed on me, and an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Time crawled by, and I lay there in the darkness, my thoughts racing. That's when I heard it, a soft, static-filled voice crackling through the truck's CB radio. I jolted upright, my heart pounding, and reached for the microphone. "Breaker, breaker, this is Big Rig Charlie," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Anybody out there?" The static hissed for a moment before a voice replied, distorted and eerie, "Hello there, Big Rig Charlie. You're not alone out here, not by a long shot." I shivered, the cryptic response sending a chill down my spine. The voice sounded distant, disconnected, as if it was coming from another world. I couldn't see any other trucks nearby, and the truck stop remained empty. "Who is this?" I demanded, my grip on the microphone tightening. The voice on the other end chuckled, a chilling sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Just call me the ghost of the high desert, friend. I've been watching you for a while now, and I've got something to show you." My blood ran cold. The voice claimed to be watching me, but from where? I glanced out the window, scanning the snow-covered landscape for any signs of movement. Nothing. The night remained as still as death. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice quivering. The voice on the radio ignored my question and continued, "You ever wonder what's out there in the darkness, Charlie? In the empty spaces between the stars? There are things out here, things you can't even begin to comprehend." I felt a growing sense of unease, as if I had stumbled into something far beyond my understanding. I wanted to disconnect the radio and put an end to this bizarre conversation, but a morbid curiosity kept me listening. "Let me show you," the voice whispered. "Turn on your headlights, Charlie. Illuminate the abyss." I hesitated for a moment, then reached for the ignition switch and turned on the headlights. The beams cut through the darkness, revealing the snow-covered expanse of the truck stop. But there was nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. "That's it, Charlie," the voice said, its tone dripping with malevolence. "Keep looking. Keep searching. You're getting closer." I scanned the area, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, but the voice on the radio insisted that something was there, something hidden in the snowy expanse. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The voice on the radio ignored my question once again and continued to taunt me. "You're just a speck in the vastness of the cosmos, Charlie. A tiny, insignificant speck. But I see you. I've always seen you." I felt a growing sense of dread as I continued to scan the area outside. It was as if the voice wanted me to find something, to uncover some hidden truth. But what could possibly be lurking in the snow-covered wasteland of Wendover, Utah? And then, as my headlights cut through the darkness, I saw it, a figure standing in the distance, partially obscured by falling snow. It was a silhouette, a human shape, and it was moving slowly towards my truck. My heart leaped into my throat, and I grabbed the microphone. "Who the hell is that? What's going on?" The voice on the radio laughed, a chilling, mirthless sound. "That, Charlie, is the one who's been watching you. The one who's been waiting for you." I watched in terror as the figure drew closer, its movements deliberate and purposeful. It was dressed in tattered, snow-covered clothing, and its face was obscured by a hood and scarf. I couldn't see its features, but the sense of malevolence radiating from it was palpable. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call for help, but there was no signal. I was alone, cut off from the outside world, with only the voice on the radio and this sinister figure for company. As the figure approached my truck, I could see its eyes, cold and lifeless, staring at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. It raised a hand, slowly and deliberately, and pointed towards the snow-covered ground. "Get out," the voice on the radio whispered. "Get out and meet your destiny, Charlie." I clenched my fists, my mind racing as I considered my options. I could stay in the safety of my truck, lock the doors, and hope that this nightmare would end. Or I could confront the figure outside, find out what it wanted, and put an end to this madness once and for all. With a trembling hand, I reached for the door handle and stepped out of the truck. The cold wind cut through my clothing, and the snow crunched beneath my boots as I approached the figure. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice quivering. The figure said nothing, its eyes locked onto mine. It raised its hand once more, this time pointing towards the horizon. I followed its gaze and saw something in the distance, a dark, imposing structure rising up from the snow-covered ground. It was a massive, monolithic tower, unlike anything I had ever seen before. It stretched high into the night sky, its surface covered in strange, otherworldly symbols and markings. It was as if the tower had materialized out of thin air, defying all logic and reason. "What is that?" I whispered, my voice filled with awe and dread. The voice on the radio chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "That, Charlie, is the gateway to the unknown. The key to unlocking the secrets of the cosmos." I watched in disbelief as the figure began to move towards the tower, its movements slow and deliberate. I had a choice to make, follow the figure into the unknown or stay behind and hope that I could escape this nightmare. But the allure of the tower was too powerful to resist. Something deep within me urged me to follow, to uncover the mysteries it held. With each step, the tower grew larger, more imposing, until it loomed over me like a god. I reached the base of the tower, and the figure turned to face me. Its eyes bore into mine, and I felt a strange sense of recognition, as if I had known this figure all my life. "Welcome, Charlie," the voice on the radio whispered. "Welcome to the beginning of the end." And then, as I stood before the tower, the world around me began to unravel. Reality itself seemed to warp and shift, and I felt myself being pulled into the depths of the unknown. I can't explain what happened next, for it defies all explanation. It was as if I had entered a realm beyond time and space, a place where the laws of reality held no sway. I saw things that no human should ever witness. I glimpsed the true nature of the cosmos, the vast, incomprehensible tapestry of existence. I saw worlds beyond worlds, dimensions beyond dimensions, and I realized that I was just a tiny, insignificant speck in the grand scheme of things. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. I found myself back in my truck, parked at the desolate truck stop near Wendover, Utah. The snow had stopped falling, and the night was once again still and silent. I was alone, the voice on the radio gone, the figure vanished into the night. The tower was nowhere to be seen, as if it had never existed. I sat there in my truck, my mind reeling, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. Had it all been a hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion and isolation? But deep down, I knew the truth. I had glimpsed something beyond the boundaries of human understanding, something that defied all logic and reason. and I couldn't escape the feeling that I had been forever changed by the experience. I started the engine and drove away from the truck stop, the memory of that night haunting me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far greater than myself, something that would forever remain a mystery. So, I share this story now, not as a warning or a plea for help, but as a testament to the strange and mysterious forces that exist in the world. There are things out there, things beyond our comprehension, and sometimes, they choose to reveal themselves to those who dare to seek the unknown. As I continue my life on the road, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever encounter the voice on the radio, the figure in the snow, or the enigmatic tower once again. Only time will tell, but one thing is certain, I'll never forget that night at the desolate truck stop near Wendover, Utah, when I glimpsed the mysteries of the cosmos and found myself forever changed. I've been on the road as a truck driver for the better part of my life, crisscrossing the vast, winding highways of the United States. I've seen my fair share of odd and eerie places, but there's one experience that stands out above all else, a nightmarish encounter that unfolded at a desolate truck stop in the heart of Nevada, at the infamous Lone Star truck stop. It was a sweltering August evening, and I was hauling a load of electronics from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City. The relentless desert sun had turned the cab of my rig into an oven, and the distant shimmer of the asphalt seemed to go on forever. With exhaustion gnawing at my bones, I knew I needed a break. That's when I saw it, the weathered sign for Lone Star truck stop looming ahead. The place was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless stretches of barren desert. It was the kind of place that made you wonder how it managed to survive, let alone thrive. I pulled into the truck stop's dimly lit parking lot and parked my rig in a secluded spot, far away from the two other trucks that sat there like silent sentinels. The air outside was stifling, and the distant hum of cicadas was the only sound that broke the oppressive silence. As I climbed into the back of my cab and settled in for some much-needed rest, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The place was deserted, not a soul in sight, and the flickering neon lights of the truck stop's sign cast eerie shadows across the asphalt. I brushed off my discomfort as mere exhaustion and closed my eyes, hoping to catch a few hours of sleep. But sleep was elusive that night, and an uneasy restlessness settled over me. Hours passed, and I lay there in the darkness, my mind racing. That's when I heard it, a faint, distant sound that sent a chill down my spine. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the night. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source of the sound. The footsteps drew closer, growing louder and more pronounced with each passing moment. Someone was approaching my truck, and the thought sent a surge of adrenaline through my veins. I lay there, paralyzed with fear, as the footsteps reached the side of my truck. I could hear the soft creak of the metal as someone, or something, leaned against it. I held my breath, my heart pounding, as I waited for what would happen next. Through a small gap in the curtains that separated the cab from the rest of the truck, I saw a shadowy figure standing just outside. It was too dark to make out any details, but I could see that whoever it was, they were watching, waiting. I fumbled for my phone, my trembling fingers struggling to dial 911. I knew I had to call for help, but there was no signal. I was stranded in the middle of the desert, cut off from the outside world, with only the darkness and this mysterious intruder for company. The minutes dragged on, and the figure outside remained motionless, as if studying my truck, studying me. I could feel their eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them clearly. I considered starting the engine and driving away, but the thought of confronting the stranger in the dark, desolate desert filled me with dread. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own truck, with no way out. As the night wore on, I watched in silent terror as the figure finally moved away from my truck and disappeared into the darkness. I listened intently, waiting for any sign that they were gone, but the desert remained eerily quiet. After what felt like an eternity, I gathered the courage to peek out through the curtains once more. The figure was nowhere in sight, and the truck stop appeared just as desolate as before. With my heart still racing, I decided that it was time to leave. I started the engine and pulled out of the truck stop, not looking back. The sense of relief that washed over me was overwhelming, but the questions lingered in my mind. Who was that mysterious figure, and what had they wanted? Why had they chosen to approach my truck in the dead of night, in the middle of nowhere? I continued on my journey, the memory of that nightmarish encounter haunting me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped a dangerous situation, that I had been the target of some sinister intent. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about the incident at Lone Star Truck Stop. I scoured the internet for any information that might shed light on what I had experienced, but I came up empty-handed. It was as if the truck stop itself had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace of its existence. I even considered reporting the incident to the authorities, but without any evidence or concrete details, I knew it would be a futile endeavor. They would likely dismiss my story as the product of a tired and overactive imagination. I shared my experience with fellow truckers, but none of them had encountered anything similar. Some suggested it might have been a fellow driver or a stranded traveler, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more sinister, something that defied explanation. As the years passed, the memory of that night began to fade, and I continued my life on the road. But every time I passed through Nevada, I couldn't help but glance at the empty expanse of desert where Lone Star Truck Stop had once stood, wondering what secrets it had held. It wasn't until a few months ago that I stumbled upon a news article that sent a chill down my spine. The article detailed the discovery of a series of unsolved disappearances in the Nevada desert, near the location of the long-abandoned Lone Star Truck Stop. The disappearances had baffled investigators, with no leads or evidence to explain the sudden vanishing of several individuals. The cases had garnered little attention in the media, and it seemed as though the desert had swallowed the victims without a trace. As I read through the article, my heart sank. I couldn't help but wonder if the mysterious figure I had encountered that night had something to do with those disappearances. Had I narrowly escaped becoming one of the vanished? The thought sent shivers down my spine, and I knew that I had to share my story, to warn others who might pass through that desolate stretch of desert. There's something out there, something lurking in the darkness, something that defies explanation. And it's watching, waiting, ready to strike when you least expect it. So, to all my fellow truckers and travelers, be cautious when you find yourself on the lonely highways of Nevada. Beware the empty expanse where Lone Star Truck Stop once stood, for there are secrets buried in the desert sands, secrets that may never come to light. I've been a long-haul trucker for over a decade now, crisscrossing the vast expanse of the United States. The job's taken me to some pretty eerie places, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that one fateful night at the desolate truck stop in the heart of Kansas. I've never shared this story before, but it's high time I do. I've got to get it off my chest. It was early November, and I was on a run from Denver, Colorado, hauling a load of electronics destined for Topeka, Kansas. The sun had set a few hours back, casting an eerie orange glow on the endless plains of Kansas. I was tired, the monotony of the highway was getting to me, and I needed a break. So, when I spotted the flickering neon sign for Wilkins Truck Stop, I decided to pull in for some much-needed rest. As I approached the truck stop, I couldn't help but notice how out of place it seemed. Located in the middle of nowhere, it looked like a relic from the past, a survivor from a bygone era. The neon sign was barely holding on, and the parking lot was empty, save for a couple of rusty old semis. I figured it was the perfect spot for a quiet night's rest. I parked my rig in one of the dimly lit spots and shut off the engine. The silence that enveloped the place was deafening. No distant hum of traffic, no chatter from fellow truckers, just the eerie stillness of the night. I climbed into the back of my cab, pulled out my blanket, and settled in for some sleep. But as I lay there in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place. The shadows seemed to dance in the flickering light from the sign, and the wind howled through the cracks in my window. I told myself it was just my imagination running wild, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Hours passed, and sleep remained elusive. I tossed and turned in the cramped bunk, my unease growing with each passing minute. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before, a mix between a snarl and a growl echoing through the night. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source of the sound. The growling continued, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. It seemed to be coming from just outside my truck, hidden in the inky darkness. With a lump in my throat, I reached for my flashlight and slowly unzipped the curtain that separated the cab from the rest of the truck. I pointed the beam of light towards the source of the noise, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There, lurking in the shadows, was a pair of glowing eyes, fierce, predatory, and blood red. They were fixed on me, unblinking and filled with an unrelenting malice. I couldn't make out the creature's form, but I could sense its malevolence, its hunger. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled for my phone to dial 911. But as I brought the phone to my ear, I realized there was no signal. The isolation of this forsaken truck stop had rendered me utterly cut off from the outside world. My heart sank as I thought of how far I was from the nearest town or help of any kind. I kept the flashlight trained on those sinister eyes, hoping that the mere presence of the light would deter whatever lurked in the darkness. But the growling continued, now accompanied by a low, menacing snarl. It was as if this creature was toying with me, relishing in my fear. I racked my brain, trying to think of a way out of this nightmare. The truck's engine was cold, and I couldn't risk starting it and drawing more attention to myself. My only hope was to wait it out, hope that whatever it was would lose interest and slink away into the night. Minutes turned into hours as I sat there, my flashlight shaking in my trembling hand. The creature didn't move, its malevolent eyes locked onto mine. I could feel it watching, waiting, and I couldn't help but wonder what it wanted. Was I its prey, or was this some twisted game it was playing? The night seemed endless, and I dared not close my eyes, for fear that the moment I did, the creature would pounce. The growling and snarling persisted, driving me to the brink of madness. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own truck, with no way out. Finally, as the first faint light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the growling ceased. The eyes slowly faded into the darkness, leaving me in blessed silence. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I knew that my ordeal was far from over. With trembling hands, I started the truck's engine and pulled out of the truck stop. The sun was rising now, casting a warm, golden glow over the barren landscape. I couldn't put that place behind me fast enough. As I drove away from Wilkins' truck stop, I couldn't help but think about what I had just experienced. What kind of creature could inspire such terror? What did it want from me? These questions haunted me as I continued on my journey. I finally arrived in Topeka, Kansas, and made my delivery without incident. But the memory of that night at the truck stop continued to gnaw at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had come face to face with something otherworldly, something that defied explanation. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. I scoured the internet for any information that might shed light on what I had experienced, but I came up empty-handed. It was as if the creature I had encountered didn't exist in the realm of human knowledge. I even considered reporting the incident to the authorities, but I knew how crazy it would sound. A trucker claiming to have been stalked by a supernatural creature in the middle of nowhere? They'd probably write me off as a lunatic. So, I kept my story to myself, sharing it with no one but my fellow trucker buddies, who listened with a mix of disbelief and unease. Some suggested that it was just a wild animal, but I knew in my gut that it was something more, something far darker. Months passed, and life on the road returned to normal. I put the incident behind me as best I could, chalking it up to a bizarre, one-time occurrence. But deep down, I knew I would never forget those blood-red eyes, that guttural growl. Fast forward to the following November, and I found myself on another cross-country run, this time from Chicago, Illinois, to Tulsa, Oklahoma. The days were growing shorter, and the nights colder as I made my way through the heartland of America. One evening, as darkness descended, I found myself once again in need of a rest stop. I spotted a sign for Miller's Truck Haven and decided to pull in. It was a much larger truck stop than the one in Kansas, and I hoped the presence of more people would put my mind at ease. I parked my rig in a well-lit area, far from the desolation of Wilkins' truck stop. I grabbed a quick bite to eat in the diner, exchanged nods with other truckers, and even engaged in some small talk. for a while, I managed to push the memory of that night to the back of my mind. But as the night wore on, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was off about this place too. The fluorescent lights in the diner buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, unnatural glow. The air was thick with the smell of grease and diesel fuel, and the constant hum of conversation was maddening. I decided to retreat to the relative peace and quiet of my truck's cab, hoping to get some rest before hitting the road again. I climbed into the bunk, pulled the curtain closed, and closed my eyes. But just like before, sleep eluded me. I lay there in the darkness, my mind racing. That's when I heard it, a low, menacing growl, just like the one from that night in Kansas. My heart sank as I realized that the nightmare was beginning anew. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly unzipped the curtain, dreading what I might see. And there it was, those same blood-red eyes, glowing with an unholy hunger. My blood turned to ice as I realized that whatever had haunted me in Kansas had followed me here. The creature's growl grew louder, more ferocious, and it seemed to be emanating from all around the truck. I could hear it on both sides, in front, and even beneath me. It was as if this thing had surrounded my truck, trapping me inside. Panic set in once more as I fumbled for my phone, praying for a signal. But just like in Kansas, there was none. I was cut off from the outside world, isolated and vulnerable. I shone my flashlight out the window, trying to catch a glimpse of the creature, but all I saw were those malevolent eyes, glowing in the darkness. It was as if the creature had no physical form, no body, only those eyes, staring at me from all directions. I felt a deep sense of dread wash over me, a feeling that this time, there would be no escape. The creature was toying with me, just as it had before, and I was its helpless prey. Hours passed, and the growling continued. I was trapped in a living nightmare, unable to move or escape. The air inside the cab grew stale, and the stench of fear was overpowering. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, the growling finally ceased. The eyes faded into the darkness, leaving me shaken and exhausted. I started the truck and got the hell out of there, not looking back. The rest of the drive to Tulsa was a blur, my mind consumed by the terror I had endured. I couldn't believe that this nightmare had followed me, that the same creature had found me once again. I made my delivery and continued on my route, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being hunted. I couldn't shake the memory of those blood-red eyes, that guttural growl. Over the next year, I encountered the creature several more times, each encounter more terrifying than the last. It seemed to be drawn to me, to my truck, no matter where I went. I tried everything to escape it, changing my route, avoiding truck stops altogether, even seeking refuge in hotels, but it always found me. I became a prisoner in my own truck, unable to escape the relentless pursuit of this malevolent entity. It would appear at the most unexpected times, in the most remote places, always with those same blood-red eyes, always with that same guttural growl. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't escape the constant fear that gripped me. I reached out to experts in the paranormal, to hunters of the supernatural, but no one could offer any answers. It was as if this creature existed outside the realm of human understanding. I even considered ending my life, to escape the never-ending torment. But I couldn't bring myself to do it, couldn't let this thing win. I had to find a way to fight back, to confront this nightmare head-on. And then, one night, as I sat in my truck, the creature appeared once more. Those blood-red eyes glowed in the darkness, and the growling filled the air. But this time, something inside me snapped. I grabbed my flashlight and threw open the cab door, determined to confront whatever lurked in the darkness. I shone the light all around, searching for the source of the growling, the eyes. And there it was, a shadowy figure, a grotesque, otherworldly creature that defied description. It had elongated limbs, sharp, bony protrusions, and a gaping maw filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Its eyes were indeed blood-red, but they held a malevolence that was beyond anything I had ever seen. I stood my ground, my heart pounding, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The creature snarled and lunged at me, and I swung the flashlight with all my strength, striking it square in the head. The creature let out a deafening shriek, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath me. It stumbled back, disoriented and wounded, and then it simply vanished, dissipating into the night. I stood there, trembling, my breath ragged, unable to believe what had just happened. I had confronted the nightmare, faced the creature that had haunted me for so long, and I had survived. From that night on, the encounters with the creature ceased. It was as if I had broken its hold on me, driven it away for good. I continued my life as a trucker, but the memory of those nights would never truly leave me. I've shared this story now, not as a warning or a plea for help, but as a testament to the inexplicable horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places. I don't know what that creature was, where it came from, or why it chose to torment me, but I do know one thing: I'll never forget those blood-red eyes, that guttural growl, and the nightmarish terror they brought into my life. It was late October, and the leaves had begun to turn brilliant shades of orange and red. I had been driving for hours, pushing through the winding roads of rural Mississippi as I made my way from New Orleans to Memphis. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the road, and my eyes were growing heavy with exhaustion. I knew I needed a break, and I had spotted a truck stop on the map a few miles ahead. It was called Hickory Haven Truck Stop, a name that sounded innocuous enough. I had no way of knowing the nightmare that awaited me there. As I approached the truck stop, I couldn't help but notice how isolated it seemed. There were no other vehicles on the road, no signs of life except for the occasional flickering street light. The place appeared deserted, like a relic from a bygone era. I pulled into the truck stop's dimly lit parking lot and parked my rig near the back, as I always did. The eerie silence that enveloped the place was suffocating, and the only sound that broke it was the faint hum of my idling engine. I climbed into the back of my cab, my muscles aching from hours of driving, and settled into my bunk. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, and a sense of unease settled over me. Something about this place just didn't feel right. I had heard stories from fellow truckers about the dangers of parking at deserted truck stops, tales of robberies, and worse. It was a risk I tried to avoid, but my exhaustion had gotten the best of me, and I had little choice but to take my chances. As I lay there in the darkness, my mind racing with thoughts of the stories I had heard, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced out the window, but there was nothing to see except the empty parking lot. I tried to dismiss my unease as paranoia, but it was persistent, like a nagging voice in the back of my mind. I decided to turn on my CB radio, hoping to find some solace in the chatter of other truckers on the road. I adjusted the dial and listened intently, but all I heard was static, a low and constant buzz that seemed to drown out any other sounds. I frowned, my unease growing, and reached for the mic to try and hail someone. Breaker, this is Road Warrior," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Anybody out there?" The static continued for a few moments before a voice finally crackled through, distorted and eerie. "Road Warrior, huh? You picked a hell of a night to be on the road." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice on the other end sounded off, like it was coming from a place far removed from reality. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice quivering. The voice on the radio laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Just call me the Watcher, my friend. I see everything that happens at Hickory Haven, and I've been watching you since you pulled in." My blood ran cold. The voice claimed to be watching me, but from where? I couldn't see anyone outside my truck, and the parking lot remained empty and still. "What do you want?" I demanded, my grip on the microphone tightening. The Watcher on the radio ignored my question and continued, "You're not the first trucker to stop at Hickory Haven, and you won't be the last. But you, my friend, are about to witness something that few have lived to tell about." I felt a growing sense of dread as I listened to the cryptic words of the Watcher. What was he talking about? What was about to happen? As if in response to my unspoken questions, the parking lot outside suddenly erupted in a cacophony of noise. I strained my eyes to see what was happening, and that's when I saw them. A group of men had emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by masks and their bodies cloaked in dark clothing. They moved with purpose, converging on a single spot in the parking lot. My heart raced as I realized what was happening. These men were not here by chance. They were here for a reason, and I was about to witness something that I could never unsee. I crouched down in my cab, my heart pounding in my chest, and watched in horror as the men began to dig. They were digging a deep hole in the frozen ground, working with a grim determination that sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the scene unfolding outside. My mind raced with a million questions, but there were no answers, only the relentless digging and the eerie silence that hung over the truck stop. As the men continued their macabre task, I noticed that they were muttering something under their breath, words that I couldn't quite make out. It was as if they were performing some kind of ritual, something dark and otherworldly. The hole in the ground grew deeper and deeper, and I realized with a sinking feeling that whatever they were burying, it was something they wanted to keep hidden, something they didn't want anyone to find. I considered calling the police, but I knew that it would be futile. I had no way to describe my location, no way to prove what I was witnessing, and I couldn't afford to draw their attention to me. So, I huddled in the cab of my truck, my eyes fixed on the gruesome scene outside, unable to look away. The men worked in eerie silence, and the night seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the men finished their grim task. They filled in the hole and covered it with dirt and leaves, erasing all traces of their dark ritual. As they dispersed into the night, I watched them disappear into the shadows, their faces still obscured by masks, their identities forever hidden. I waited until I was sure they were gone before I dared to speak into the radio once more. "Watcher, are you still there? What did I just witness?" The watcher's voice crackled through the radio, filled with a sense of satisfaction. "You've witnessed something that few have lived to tell about, my friend. You've seen the secrets that Hickory Haven hides." I knew then that I had to get out of there, to put as much distance between myself and that truck stop as possible. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had witnessed. As I drove away from Hickory Haven, I couldn't escape the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The secrets of that truck stop, the dark ritual I had witnessed, would forever haunt my nightmares.